Hey everyone, welcome to TechStrong TV. Today's July 16th, it's Thursday, and we hope you're having a great day. You're healthy, well, working hard, and feeling productive. We're going to try to help you make you more productive by giving you what's new in tech. We've got some great interviews, some great commentary, just some great content to share with you today. We hope you're enjoying. This is episode 66 of TechStrong TV, by the way. Hard to believe. You know, we launched, I guess, in March, and it just keeps rolling along, rolling. For those who are watching this in the morning, I'm going to ask you to, if you'd like to jump over to our virtual event that we're putting on with our friends from InfluxDB today. On time series data. It's excellent if you're into Influx or Prometheus or, the whole time series database and how it reflects with AI ops and so forth. You might want to check that out. You can get to it off of devops.com. Also, RSA conference, APJ, is free and available. It is, I believe, on demand right now because, of course, it takes place on Singapore time. But do check that out. And as usual, we have a full slate of media ops webinars that Charlene will tell you about later on in the show. But let me tell you what else we have in store for today. I did an interview with John Livingston, who's the CEO of Verve Industrial. Verve's been around, I think, since 1994 or so. And they specialize in securing and protecting industrial controls. So SCADA and that type of thing. And if you don't think these are a potential hotspot, look, the Stuxnet of 10 years ago was probably one of the biggest examples of what can happen there. But, recent events in Iran, there's been several explosions, and cyber is suspected, some sort of cyber intervention, malware, whatever. But, critical infrastructure, critical industrial controls are vulnerable, and we need to be locking them down. And that's what Verve does. We're going to talk to John about what they see happening and what's kind of the latest over in that world. Then I was really happy to actually speak to him, I think on his first day as the CEO. Tucker Calloway, who previously was at Sauce Labs and other companies, was appointed the new CEO over at LogDNA. There's a lot of companies that chase sort of the log rainbow or pot of gold. I mean, I did another interview yesterday with a good log company called Zebrium. And, they all are trying to, number one, allow you to gather as much log data as you can. 2, get your hands around and analyze it. And number 3, try to sift the signal-to-noise ratio to bring you what's important. Tucker's going to talk about how they're going to try to do that, or how they are doing that and trying to do better at LogDNA, as well as his background and how he views the role of a CEO, especially in the middle of COVID and everything going on. So that'll be a good one. And then one I'm really excited about. I met Liz Zalman, CEO of Strong DM. And Strong DM is a interesting company in the IAM space. They make it really easy to spin up remote workers, to spin up how people access the infrastructure on your company. And I interviewed Liz, and I also did a podcast with their CTO co-founder. And I was really intrigued by, especially with this COVID situation, how quickly they were helping companies spin up remote workforces. Liz was nice enough to go out and get a couple of companies for us. And these are, like Strong DM, these are companies that are, venture-backed startups that are, using cutting edge, using new tools to do things better, faster. And so one of these companies is on today, and it's called Customer. It's customers with a K. So it's the word customer spelled with a K. And so we speak with both Liz and Steve Finchbaugh of Customer with a K about how they are using IAM to better enable their own workforce. And Customer with a K provides a CRM for customer service to a lot of household name companies. They've done a great job. So in that interview with Liz and Steve Finchbaugh, you'll find out more about that. Then we're going to go into the archives for something old from our TechStrong Con event again, which was early June. And today we have Tracy Walker of New Vector, who's going to talk about how to automate security in a Kubernetes cluster, and it's a DevSecOps piece. I think you'll find it very informative, very useful. I'll then be back with the news, then turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. Charlene has Alex Heath, Chief Research and Development Officer at Security Scorecard, on today. After Charlene, we are going to head over to Mitch, and Mitch has a little bit of commentary as a lead-in to a video he did around enterprise architecture with Andreas Chris, Lean IX CEO and co-founder, and how enterprise architecture is still relevant and important and why you need to be on top of it. And then lastly, really happy, our next, I think this is episode 2 of Jane Explains. It's my partner, Jane Grohl, CEO, DevOps Institute. And in this Jane Explains, Jane's going to be talking about the continuous delivery ecosystem, which is also the subject of DevOps Institute's Skill Up Day this month. And, they do one a month, and this month's subject is the CD ecosystem. And, of course, Jane is also a member of the CDF, Continuous Delivery Foundation. So good stuff over there. I hope you'll enjoy it. I'll be back to wrap it up after that. We've got a big Thursday planned for you. We're going to take a quick break with a commercial from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with our first interview.
Join top experts and peers for a Splunk virtual event, DevOps Open Source Insights and Innovations. Open source powers the world, drives innovation in technology and in practice, and reduces the proliferation of products that just don't work together. In the arena of DevOps, open source tools and standards enable problems to get solved. Come take a look at some of the ways Splunk solves problems with open source and how we are contributing to open source solutions to make your work life better. Register today.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, our first interview is with the CEO of Verve Industrial, John Livingston. Verve has been around for, it's got to be 25, maybe more years, 27 years now. And their mission hasn't changed. But the environment and the tools and things they do have changed drastically. It's always been known that so much of our critical infrastructure that is susceptible is in our industrial control systems. Whether we're talking about electric or nuclear power plants or water, is just sort of public utility critical infrastructure, or other things, industrial critical infrastructure, such as the machines that spin up centrifuges in Iran, or here in the U.S., any of our manufacturing capabilities, some of the advanced factories. Industrial controls control the machines that are building and operating so much of what we depend on. And they're susceptible. They're susceptible to cyber attack like never before. Verve has been fighting this fight for, as I said, 25 plus years. John Livingston is their CEO. I had a chance to catch up with John and really understand what is the new attack vector. Right? What are the new attack surfaces that Verve is seeking to protect and to keep our industrial systems as safe as possible. So now here is my interview with John Livingston from Verve Industrial.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this session here for TechStrong TV. For this session, I'm joined by John Livingston, who is the CEO of Verve Industrial. Hey John, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's our pleasure. So John, I don't think we've ever had Verve Industrial on, and so it's a new company to our audience. Why don't we start with a little bit about Verve and a little bit about your background, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Thanks very much. Quick background on Verve. The company has been in existence for a little over 25 years. We actually celebrated our 25th anniversary last year. It was founded by my partner now as a industrial controls engineering firm. So essentially designing control systems for power and water and oil and gas, et cetera. And about a dozen years ago or so, we got involved in cybersecurity, in large part due to the regulatory requirements of the power industry, called NERC-CIP, which started back in '07 or so. And our clients asked us, hey, how do we address this in industrial control systems? And so at that point, the company started to build a software platform, to help our clients secure these control systems. Fast forward a dozen years, and now about 80–90% of our business is focused around cybersecurity. And we have two parts to our business. We have our software piece and the services. So we sell what we call the Verve Security Center, which is a platform, an integrated platform that basically brings all of the cybersecurity requirements into a single pane of glass. And then separately, we have a services business that helps our clients assess their current security levels and then over time improve and mature on their security program. And me personally, I joined the company now almost 5 years ago. I spent 20 years of my career at McKinsey & Company, which is a global consulting firm.
Sure.
And I left there back in 2015, I guess it was. And I've been working with Bob Beavis, who was the founder of Verve, ever since.
Great story. So John, look, obviously we're living in kind of uncharted waters, crazy times. How has, present circumstances with COVID and everything, what are you guys seeing over at Verve in terms of sort of industrial security and so forth?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this shock to industrial facilities. I'm not sure we've seen this big of a one-time shock in terms of what it means for control systems, maybe since World War II or something, because over the last 10 years or so, people have been talking a lot about Industry 4.0, connected manufacturing, and all of that. But it's been a relatively slow pace, right? These control systems don't change very quickly. The people who run them have a lot of concerns about moving quickly into the cloud, et cetera. Remote access is very scary in these environments because if you change something the wrong way, you trip the plant or worse. But within the course of 4 weeks, basically, we got maybe 10 years of progress around remote access. It was all of a sudden necessary. I can't have people come to the plant. I need to go to skeleton crews, but I still need to have work done. Problems happen. These systems are 25 years old. They got to get fixed. So we saw this explosion of remote access. And with remote access comes remote risks. There's been this term of art often used as there's an air gap, so to speak, between the OT or industrial control systems and the IT side. Air gap meaning, they're not connected. We got a separation. You can't get one. That was always a bit of a myth anyway, but I think everybody now realizes that myth is exploded because I now need to give people remote access. So from a security point of view, what that's meant is the vulnerability or risk to these systems has exploded overnight. And so all of the planned steps that everybody was taking. Okay, don't connect this until we do this. Or boom, it gets blown up. And genie's not going back in the bottle, right? I mean, once people have figured out, holy cow, you mean I can do this remotely and save costs and all the rest. We've been at this now long enough, and it's still going to go on for a while. Our sense is that this is the new world order. And so what that means from a cybersecurity point of view is significantly greater risks to those very insecure endpoints that sit inside those OT networks. And so it's a very scary time in the industrial controls world.
I agree with you. But, you said something that about people didn't have a choice but to give access. Right, and it's not just industrial controls. It's a lot of what we're seeing in security. Right, no one's there in person. I used to be in the hosting business 30 years ago. I started before it was called hosting, and what we used to say is we were eyes, ears, and pipe. Right, eyes, ears, and fingers. Excuse me, power, ping, and pipe. Eyes, ears, and fingers. Right, so we could watch, we could heard, and we could type or touch something. We still deliver power, ping, and pipe, but we don't necessarily. Well, we still have eyes. We may not have ears on the scene, but we could see things remotely. But the fingers on, you got to do it remotely, and so people have had to. But quite frankly, also, John, even working from home as a CEO, I've had to learn to live with my whole team is remote. And, you want to think you've hired kindergarten kids who don't work because they're not in the office? Shame on you. You hired the wrong kids, or you're paranoid, one or the other. There's a little bit about that. But when we're talking about industrial controls, on the other hand, the downside, right, of giving access
is much greater. And also, I think maybe the biggest difference is these systems were not designed for security, right? They were put in 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. They were intentionally built so that someone who was a PLC programmer could easily go in and write ladder logic. There was never a concept that, someone's going to try and hack these. As a result, once you get through that hard, crunchy exterior of the firewall, it's a pretty soft, squishy middle. And what we now have started to call OT systems management hasn't existed, right? So in the IT world, we've had ITSM for years. Yeah. We configure things securely. We patch them. We manage user access controls. All of those core IT functions. Well, that doesn't happen in most OT environments, right? It's an environment where just make sure it doesn't break. We've got a lot of devices that don't have passwords or don't have the right kind of user access. Many devices aren't patched. And so what you've done is you've basically cut a hole through your wall, but you didn't then protect what was inside. And so what we're spending most of our time focused on is that endpoint security, right? So yes, we need to monitor remote access, but the reality is that once you have vendors accessing that remotely, you start to get into a world where you can't really determine who the heck had that remote access. And so we have to protect what's inside that perimeter, and we need to start implementing endpoint management that we call OTSM.
Agreed. There's another piece of it too, John. I'm reminded years ago at one of the companies I co-founded, we were selling security in the Department of Interior to U.S. Geological Survey. Right? Now these folks have seismic sensors, earthquake, sensors on the bottom of the oceans, right? Because underwater earthquakes. And quite frankly, they weren't designed with security in mind, right? So they had very little. They were connected, obviously, because we had to get readings from them, but they weren't connected in a secure fashion, let's call it. And in talking to the scientists, and God bless the scientists, right, about the need to secure these underwater sensors, they were like, hold on a second, this is science. We don't want to secure them. This has got to be available to people. This is important data where, and so you want to talk about a mission, right? And the cloudiness of the mission. Yes, we want people to be able to access the seismic data at the bottom of the ocean. But if someone wants to blind us to what's going on by taking those seismic sensors down and out,
yeah.
There's got to so it's tough, as you mentioned. You're dealing with devices that were designed 25 years ago, and security wasn't part of that mission for that device. As a matter of fact, they tried uber hard to make it near impossible for it to be not connected, because it was more important that, above all, this thing had to stay connected so that it can do its job, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And the idea of updating it with a patch, well, geez, that's all of a sudden going to introduce some change in the software that may not be approved, et cetera. So you get these, we'll go into some of the environments, and within a particular plant, there'll be a couple of thousand critical vulnerabilities in that plant because the systems just haven't been patched.
Yeah, now, I was talking to another CEO a couple of weeks ago, and I don't remember the name of the company now, but they provide sort of instrumentation for factories, for manufacturing industry. And what they were saying is, the first thing they do is they look at the machinery there, and they make a determination: does that machinery have the capability of even reporting on status metrics, or do they need to bolt something onto it that kind of does that job?
Yeah.
Right. And
you can't believe that, but it's absolutely true.
No, that's the first sort of decision tree, right? Can this thing even talk to us, or do we have to put something on here that'll talk to us and tell us what's going on there, right? What the temperature is, or whatever their it's do or die. I mean, but I don't want to get all negative on people. You know what, John? The fact of the matter is that, by and large, we've done a remarkable job. Companies like Verve and others have done a remarkable job of making sure that these remote systems stay up, at least, and are functioning, right? And are giving them the best security they can right now, right? The fact that our internet works pretty darn well in the cloud, and we're here on Zoom recording this, and all of these things. I mean, that's granted, that's not industrial, right? Kind of scale.
No, but it's the same. I mean, these industrial controls engineers that work in these plants is just amazing what they do with, with some pretty old stuff. And the fact that they're able to keep them running and keep them up, and now particularly when they're doing that with half the staff that they normally have,
there's a real problem.
And there's a big upside if you do this right. You not only can enable the remote access you need to do that, but you can do it in a secure way. And then once you've got that going and you build the security in, you then can actually do remote management of the security as well. And so you don't put that extra burden now on the controls engineer to not only be making sure the plant is up and running, but making sure that the Russians aren't in the grid or something like that.
Well, and here's another thing, John. Look, God willing, this whole situation is going to be resolved with COVID, right? We'll get a vaccine. There'll be some treatments. I want to believe that. And things go back to whatever a new normal looks like. We're not going to turn back the clock and undo all the advances that we had to do here. It'd be ridiculous, right? So we do get the benefit of that, right, going forward, and then with the leisure of being able to be on site, fingers, ears, eyes, right, we could improve on what we had to do sort of in a rally mode. over a longer term sort of plan. So that's all good stuff. John, we didn't even mention, I apologize, for people, Verve Industrial, where do people get more information? What's the website?
Thank you very much. It's www.verveindustrial.com. So we'd love folks to come to the website and check out what we do.
Absolutely. We're about out of time. I want to thank you for joining us. Keep up the great work. Keep doing what you guys are doing. All right. John Livingston, CEO at Verve Industrial here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
There's nothing like the unbounded enthusiasm of a CEO's first day on his job. I was able to catch up with Tucker Calloway the first day they announced that he was the new CEO at LogDNA. Tucker comes from Tucker actually comes from an engineering background, moved over into the business side of or technical background, moved over into the business side of things, sales and so forth, and business development. Long resume, most recently with Sauce Lab, and now CEO of LogDNA. The log marketplace is crowded with competitors. There's some great companies, some okay companies, but all chasing that same idea, which is to provide as much actionable intelligence, and now to even try to automate that actionable, results of that actionable intelligence that we can gather from log information. Tucker has a good handle on it, and he has a good idea of where LogDNA needs to go to rise to the top of the log market, and he tells us all about it in this interview. So now here's Tucker Calloway, CEO at LogDNA.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel. You're watching TechStrong TV, and we've got a good segment coming up here for you. I feel a little bit like a wedding singer. If you've ever been to a wedding and they're going to introduce the bride and groom, and it's like, for the first time ever, Mr. and Mrs., right? So I'm here to introduce for the first time ever as the CEO of LogDNA, Tucker Calloway. Hey, Tucker, welcome to TechStrong TV, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and excited for the new job too.
Absolutely. So I guess it's still a bit of a thrill when they say the CEO, Tucker Calloway.
Yeah,
it has a nice ring to it.
I was saying I'm a very popular guy this morning. It'll probably last till maybe noon on the West Coast, and then it'll be over with, and then it's back to work.
Yeah, kind of. That's how it goes, right? But hey, enjoy every minute of the and bask in that sunlight, because it's a good thing. So, Tucker, first of all, congratulations. But I think LogDNA is a company that's pretty familiar to our audience, whether they be from the security side of the house or DevOps and cloud native and stuff like that. But just in case, why don't we do a real quick kind of foundational LogDNA story?
Yeah, great. I'll just do the quick couple bullets on the company. But so LogDNA is a centralized log management platform. Our focus is empowering DevOps teams and DevOps engineers to take control of their data for the purpose of troubleshooting, compliance, security, and things of that nature. Obviously, want to help them get valuable insights out of their logs and help them both control the way they manage that data, as well as how they get value out of that data. Built on Kubernetes, we're optimized to scale for modern technologies and And being built on Kubernetes, we have flexible deployment models, which allows us to be in our cloud, in your cloud, on-prem, however you see fit to deploy.
Absolutely. And, Tucker, in my 30 years now in IT, 25 plus, almost 30 years, one of the things that has never stopped, has always been a constant, is the need for logs and log files and log analysis. And it seems like whether we go through big data or data ops or whatever, from security and SIMs and everything else, we want to log more and more and more. It's like a thirst that is never quenched. Right? We want more logs. We can measure everything, so we should measure everything. We can log everything, so we should log everything. And in some ways it's good, but in some ways we create our own problems, right? Is there such a thing as too many logs, Tucker?
Well, I'm partial to log data, of course.
I'm sure. Well, yeah.
Yeah, and so I love
vested
for
interest,
everyone to
as
log
they say.
and do it with log DNA. But no, I think there's a frustration in the market, and that's one of the things that we're trying to address. And the way we talk about that internally, and increasingly externally, is I call it the cost curve problem, and that's basically the relationship between the cost of logging and the value you get out of logging, right? And so we see a huge opportunity to focus on both control and value, and control is really focusing on the cost side of the equation, but there's also the value side of the equation too. And so as this data grows, how do DevOps teams get value out of that data is a very meaningful topic right now for our customers, right?
Sure.
And what DevOps engineers, as they transform and as they're responsible increasingly for the delivery of a full end-to-end service or full end-to-end product, we don't want them spending a bunch of time trying to create great log management strategies and disciplines and capabilities and competencies. That's what we're here for, right? So that's the purpose of LogDNA and why we exist, is to help our customers derive the value out of the logs and make sure they're appropriately storing their data right now. So that's where we're focused on, both control and value. So I do think that there's an inherent value in all of the data. But what's the most important thing about that is, do you store it in the right way, and can you get value out of it at the time when you need to get value out of it?
That is an important thing. I bag dived right in on that log question. I apologize. I actually wanted to do a little bit more of giving you your moment in the sun. So you were appointed or announced CEO today. Give our audience a little bit of your own personal journey. How does Tucker Calloway come to be CEO today?
Yeah, well, it's funny. Someone asked me recently, when did you know you wanted to be a CEO? And my answer was, it was 1999 when I was a kind of fresh out of Cal computer science major working at Anderson Consulting. And I watched a guy named George Shaheen came on stage. He was the CEO of Anderson Consulting at the time. And I actually went on to work at a company where George was on the board. So it was kind of a good life journey for me. But I watched George walk on stage and watched his presence and everything. I just knew from that day forward, I always wanted to be a CEO. The path I took was essentially a path through kind of sales organizations and go-to-market organizations. I've been super fortunate and blessed to have spent the last 6 or 7 years in DevOps. And so if you DevOps is such a common thing, Agile is all such a common thing today. But if you rewind 7, 8 years ago in the early days at Chef, we were doing a lot of, kind of evangelism type work around what is DevOps and what is the culture of DevOps and what is the change that needs to happen and things like that. And somewhere in the middle of that time, it really took off to what it is today. And so I just feel really blessed to have been through that time at Chef and work with the great people I work with at Chef. And that carried me through both Chef and Sauce Labs and now, of course, at LogDNA. So, kind of along the way, I've really centered in on, I think partially because of my technical background, but also because of this experience I've had around DevOps, I've really settled into this change that's happening in the market and that's continuing to happen. Right, a lot of people have notionally made commitments to DevOps, but there's also a long way to go to make it really happen in the way that it's intended to happen. And if you look at people that were born into DevOps versus people who are trying to transform into DevOps, it's a very different journey, and that's one of the reasons we're here.
Yeah. Now, someone. I don't know where people ever got the notion that DevOps was easy. That wasn't one of the speed, yeah, automation, yeah, better quality, yeah, easy. I don't think that was ever a lyric in the songbook, but Tucker. So I started DevOps.com almost 6.5 years ago now, going on 7, and that was one of I think the biggest revelations in the first, let's say, 3-4 years, was all these people who thought hey, this DevOps sounds great, we're going to do it. And then 6 months or a year and a half later said, we're not really meeting our goals, or this is more harder than it appears, or, we're hitting a lot of resistance here. And how do I change culture anyway? And, stuff like that. So I hear you. Now, of course, it's interesting, right? Like you, I did a lot of business roles in the companies that I helped found over the years. And when you look at where CEOs come from, they generally come from either the technical side of the house with an engineering background, or from the business side of the house, right? Sales, marketing, or ops, stuff like that. To me, though, to be a successful if you want to call it business or sales, marketing kind of person, especially in the DevOps space, especially in the world of cloud native, you've got to have some sort of technical knowledge base, right? You may not have to be able to write code today, but you have to understand. I hear you, but you've got to understand what the developers' dilemmas are. What are the, what's keeping developers from doing more, better, faster, right? What's keeping DevOps teams from really, setting this thing free? What's keeping security even from, getting better integrated with DevOps teams and making, continuing to make security more synonymous with quality? You need, it can't just be I'm selling widgets. Selling widgets doesn't help you sell DevOps. I would put forth the proposition that you can't sell DevOps even, right? It's not something you sell.
I in whatever you sell, you always, or whatever you're doing, you're really solving problems is what you're doing.
Exactly.
And in order to do so, you have to have empathy for and understanding for the people whose problems you're trying to solve. Like, I think it's as simple as that. And whether you're selling sales CRM software or you're selling DevOps, capabilities to people, it's really about, understanding your customer, understanding where they are, what challenges they're going through, and providing a solution that makes their life better. And I think our role as a company, especially in the DevOps world, as people go through transformations, is to show people what they're capable of, right? Where so many enterprises are entrenched in the way that things were, and they're motivated and inspired by what they could be, but they often need a spark plug to come in and help them get to that spot. And that's where I really feel like a company like LogDNA can shine, or that's where we'll continue to shine, is that, we work with the people that are born into DevOps. We understand their patterns and practices, and then we can bring that knowledge to the enterprises that are trying to go through. They have more to change. They have more legacy to change. And so we're really excited about the journey.
Absolutely. So, Tucker, you've had positions at Chef, Sauce Labs, as you mentioned. Beyond, the allure of being offered a CEO job or CEO position, what was it about LogDNA that made you say, hey, I'm excited about their prospects? LogDNA is unique and special because.
Yeah, so I think it's a lot of what I've been talking about, but then I would kind of zoom it in on the log management space. I feel like that's an area that's ripe for disruption. I think there's a lot of kind of unmet demand there when it comes to DevOps. When you think about what's really formed me was experiences I had in watching Chef transform DevOps. I watched Sauce Labs transform the way people think about QA in DevOps. Of course, Chef is more on the infrastructure automation side. That really hasn't happened in log management, right? That really hasn't happened in some of the areas around observability. And one of the things that I learned at Chef, and I think is carried throughout, is like, to make a cultural change, you have to have a system of, the people and the process and the tools, and those three pillars have to support the change, or support the culture, or support the strategy that you're trying to deploy. And I haven't seen the log management tools make that shift yet. And so that's where I see this incredible opportunity. I think that's what, I know that's why our customers that we have today have picked us. And I know that's why we're such a powerful engine behind what IBM is doing in terms of, moving and migrating their customers to the cloud. So IBM is obviously a big part of our success. And so I think that's really what attracted me to it.
Excellent. This is a funny time to be taking over a company that's it's in many ways it's not normal times, right? We have this COVID thing kind of having everyone work from home, and a lot of people out of work, a lot of instability in the market. How is that kind of affecting your plans as CEO to come in here and hit the ground running?
Yeah, so there's so much going on in the world right now that's a tough question to answer simply, but I'll give it a run anyways.
Mm-hmm. It's all you can do.
Yeah, it's all we all can do, right? And
exactly
that's our responsibility is to continue to try to push forward as simply as we can. So, from a business standpoint, we're in a fortunate position that we enable people's migration to the cloud. We enable online services, and so far we've been having kind of record months and record quarters, and things have been great. Like, things were growing at the pace we expected to. We're hiring to plan. In fact, we're thinking about accelerating hiring and accelerating our plans for the second half of the year right now. So we feel very good about the state of the business. So that's positive from an employee experience and how we all feel every day. We were trending towards remote anyways. That was a trend we were going down. I think the global circumstances have forced all of us to swing that pendulum farther than we would want to. I do feel very committed to kind of remote work as a good style. We've proven we can be successful. We've proven we can be effective in doing it. I would rather not have it be this far. I'd rather be able to see some people maybe once a week or monthly or something like that. So I'd like to have that, personal engagement. It's important to me. I think it's important to the company to do so. And then, there's also this other dynamic in the world too about, what are we all doing to make the world a better place and to make it a more fair place and a more equitable place. And that's an area that I'm very focused on too. Like, I've always really focused on the customer, and I've focused on a good employee experience. And so now I know that I need to add to that mission and the agenda that do we focus on our customers? Are we enjoying ourselves and having fun? And are we making the world a better place as we go about that process? And it's easy to say you're a small company and I'm not sure what my role is in this, but now is actually the time to really double down on that, to start the right foundations for equality and things like that, and to figure out what role you as a person and then you as a company want to play in making that true.
I couldn't agree more. Right? It's a lot easier to steer the ship, change course, and make these changes that they almost can seem small now, but as the journey goes forward, it's a lot harder down the road to change that course, to make move the inertia in an organization or change culture. So I agree with you, man, 100% on that road. Overall, I mean, I think you hit on something, Tucker, that we've been hearing from a lot of companies. Hey, if your business is involved in cloud transformation, digital transformation, enabling, these kinds of migrations and services, you've had a good quarter. You've had a good run with this COVID thing. Like I've heard people say, we've stuffed 3 years of cloud transformation into 3 months, right? And so that's good. Of course, and quite frankly, the same holds true for us here at MediaOps, right? We write about and we cover these areas. But I worry what's going to happen in September, right? The summer's the summer. It's usually, kind of what it is. But what's going to happen in September and October? How long does this rapid, fleeing to the cloud, how long could that fuel us around an economy that in general is, has such turmoil in it and instability? As a CEO, that's something you got to worry about now, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. It was on my mind when I was running sales too. So
yeah, well, welcome to that club, right? and we just hope. I guess the hope has to be that number one, there's so much cloud and digital transformation to come. Right there.
Well, look, I mean, think about it. I think about it this way, Alan. If you think about the conversation we had earlier around DevOps, right? This DevOps transformation's been happening for 8, 9, 10 years. It's at least been happening in earnest for 6 years, right? Mm-hmm. And we're still seeing new opportunities all the time, and we're still seeing how early we are in that process, and how much it takes to unseat some of the traditional ITSM, ITIL, type constructs that were put in place, right? And those things take time, and so there is this massive acceleration to the cloud, but the burning in of the operational procedures, and how do we do this at scale, and how do we maintain it over periods of time, and how do we make sure we have the right security protocols in place, and how do we respond to new threats, and how do we troubleshoot and provide performing applications? All that stuff is a lifelong journey. I believe, and everything we thought we had solved for, and I looked back, 20 years ago in my career, doing more traditional IT operation stuff, we didn't solve for that completely, and now here we are in DevOps, still continuing to try to solve for it. So I do believe that there's a bit of a lifelong pursuit there that will always continue to evolve as technologies change and evolve, and so I hope that will continue to pull us forward. And I hope for those enterprises that we support, that as they move to online services, that opens up new opportunities for them, new ways of doing business, new ways of transacting that are more effective, that support us as people in this kind of new interesting time.
Absolutely. Excellent answer. Hey man, we're about out of time, but if we had more, I think I'd make you go grab that guitar back there and maybe play a song for us or two. Were you a chef when John Willis was there at all, or?
I wasn't. No, I don't know John.
He probably left. John was one of the first, I don't know, maybe 50 people there or whatever. But if we ever go back on the road and do DevOps conferences and cloud native conferences and stuff again, John with them, some of our folks around here do, and usually, especially if we're staying at an Airbnb or something, we go back and do a little jamming at night.
I'm just good for a couple simple chords, really.
That's all we need, you man. A little maybe rhythm guitar on backup. Yep, we'll definitely put you in the band though. Tucker, hey, congratulations. I'm going to hold you to that. Congratulations on the CEO gig. Looking for big things from you guys. Stay in touch with us, right?
I will. Looking forward to connecting back, and I'd love to keep you involved in our progress and everything. So thanks for sure.
I'm going to hold you to that one too. Yeah, Tucker Calloway, CEO at LogDNA here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
Strong DM is one of those New York-based tech startups that kind of reminds me of when I was in what they called Silicon Alley back in the late 90s. There's a vibrancy and a speed and just there's something about New York that makes New York, New York. And I think Strong DM embodies it well, including their CEO, Elizabeth Zalman. I've met Liz, and we've done some interviews and some podcasts, but she was kind enough to go out and reach out to some other area companies and talk about what they're doing and how they're making out during COVID and everything else. and these are companies that work with Strong DM. So I've got the first, we're going to do 3 or 4 of these. The first one is up today, and it's with a company called Customer, and that's spelled with a K. So as Liz tells me, it's Customer with a K. And so I was able to catch up with Liz Zalman, CEO at Strong DM, and Steve Flinchbaugh of Customer with a K, who made me understand or helped me understand how they're using identity and access control systems to rapidly spin up. They have new teams coming on board, in this case Durham, and new people working remotely, new situations, to give them access to the assets they need on the customer network so that customer can continue to provide best-in-class CRM for customer service to companies, many of which are household names. So let's now go to my interview with Liz Zalman of Strong DM and Steve Flinchbaugh of Customer with a K.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this next session here on TechStrong TV. This is going to be a really good session. It's something we haven't done before. I have 2 guests, which we've done before, but we're really going to take 2 different companies and see how they interact and how that helps, especially, given everything that we have going on around us. Let me introduce my 2 guests to you first. First of all, we have Elizabeth Zalman. Elizabeth's the CEO of Strong DM. I think we've done at least a podcast and so forth with Strong DM before. Liz, hey, welcome. Thanks to TechStrong TV.
Thanks, Alan. Nice to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Okay. And then joining Liz and I is Steve Flinchbaugh. Steve is with a company called Customer, and that's spelled with a K. And he's going to tell us about it, as well as his position and background there. Steve, why don't we start off with you, okay? Customer with a K, what do you guys do? And what do you specifically do at Customer?
Sure, Alan. Thank you for having me. So I'm a senior SRE at Customer. And what Customer is it is a CRM for customer support. And we really are built off of our platform. There's a lot of intelligent automation that allows our customer service teams, our customers, to give the best possible customer experience that they can and accomplish their customer service goals through ideally less staff and less effort using our platform. My goal as a senior SRE is to ensure the reliability of our platform, the kind of implicit trust that everyone expects, and to make the job for our developers as easy and seamless as possible.
Cool. So a real live SRE right here on our show. It's very cool. It's there's a lot. I don't know if you guys have seen. There's been a lot of articles written lately in the press around, are we overblowing the whole SRE thing, right? And is it real? How real? And where does it fit in? And all of these other things. But anyway, Liz, we gave Steve a good chance to tell us about Customer with a K. Let's give you your chance. Tell us about, remind our audience about Strong DM.
Yes. Steve is one of my favorites, by the way. So is Customer with a K. They're one of the most forward-thinking customers with a C that we have.
Okay. Very good play on CK there.
Strong is it's a proxy, it's a control plane, it's insert whatever word you want there, and it lets you manage and audit access to servers, to databases, to Kubernetes clusters, to whatever infrastructure you're running that is firewalled. So typically that access is managed by hand or keys are sitting in a box or a vault somewhere, and we let you collapse all of that down into a single control plane for both the management and auditing of that access.
Yep. And I just, look, I feel like we have to mention that, given the whole COVID situation and working from remote, Strong DM has been a real godsend to a lot of companies who, had to kind of flip a switch and empower remote people to have access and stuff that, from a different place on different machines, devices than they had before. So though Strong DM had a great case before COVID, right? A great use case. Post-COVID, Liz, how many, I'm not asking for the amount of customers, but I mean, you've seen a lot, I imagine you've seen a lot of activity from customers who are, have switched to remote and need help with that.
Yeah, certainly it was challenging before. I think most companies today have remote workers anyways, or multiple office locations. With the lockdown with COVID, I think what ended up happening is for companies who rely on the corporate network itself as a perimeter within the building, that perimeter is now gone. And so what do you do? If you're using something that's IP based, all of a sudden your IP surface area went from like 2 to 5,000 if you're an enterprise. So we certainly saw a doubling down of existing customers and an increase in interest in the product. I might ask Steve, like, could you have imagined what was it like? You guys have an office in New York. Do you guys have remote workers? Yeah.
Yeah, so we have an office in New York, and that's our headquarters. And we recently acquired some office space down in Durham, North Carolina. So that's kind of our first official outpost. And that was our kind of introduction to people outside of New York. And this was after we had adopted Strong DM. And I have to say it was entirely seamless. And ever since the pandemic began, I know it's good because I haven't thought about it that much.
That is always you know what? So I was in security for 20 years. They didn't call it cyber then, it was InfoSec. But we always used to say if they didn't think about it and it didn't hit anyone's radar screen that that was a good thing. When people hear about security stuff, it's because something bad happened. But I want to make a point here though, and that is, Steve, it's my understanding you guys you're not a Johnny come lately to Strong DM. You guys were using this well before COVID and the present situation. Talk to us. Let's go back in time to then. It was about 1.5 years ago, right?
Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind, I'd like to go even further back in time, about 4 years ago when I joined Customer.
Okay.
You joined it 4 years ago?
4 years in September.
Wow. How big were you then?
I was, I think, employee number 16. We were still in stealth mode. We weren't charging our customers yet. And Steve comes into Customer bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. But at this time, we were running agents on our servers to provide SSH access to our engineers. And I was charged by the CTO to stand up a VPN, which I had never done. And this came in the form of OpenVPN, and I had to manage the certificates and the login and the users and every employee that joined the company. I had to onboard them and configure a profile. And then fast forward to, I think it was about 1 year ago, where the CTO again came to us and said, hey, it's a really cool company that I think we should take a look at. We have a mutual investor, and they have a lot of cool features that we haven't had for the past 3 years. So we had a couple really cool meetings with Liz and her team, and I could immediately tell that we were working with a team that knew what they were talking about. They were technical, they were fun to work with, and they kind of just got what we needed out of the tool. And now, today, there are so many things that are taken off of my plate, in addition to more features for security and making developers' lives easier, that Strong DM now gives us.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Now we can fast forward to Durham and how Strong DM helped with the rollout there of a new, I don't want to call it a remote office, but I think you used the term outpost. Was that?
Yeah, so it's definitely like we call it HQ2, I believe. But we've got a fully functioning, we call it squad. So we kind of have self-sufficient cross-functional teams out there and everywhere across the country. But Durham was our first remote squad, if you will. And the neat thing about Strong DM is I don't necessarily have to say when a new user joins, when someone joins the company, there's not necessarily a task in my to-do list. It's so self-service with our Okta configuration. A user can go in and say, hey, I want to start using Strong DM. I've heard all about it. How do I get access to our data stores and our private resources? And at that point, I get an email, I can add them to a role, to a group, and they're happily on their way. So I don't need to configure a profile. I don't need to do anything special for these individuals. So from my perspective, it's incredibly easy to onboard new and remote folks.
That sounds like too good to be true. Is it true, Steve?
It does feel too good to be true sometimes.
Okay, and you're saying you guys use Okta for a lot of your IAM and stuff like that?
Yeah, part of our maturation as a company, back in the day, we had, of course, authentication and identity all over the place, and now it's much more unified. All of our tools that can integrate with Okta, it just makes it that much easier. And again, it's just things that I don't have to think about as often.
So Liz, let me throw something back at you. Again, the whole IAM space is something I'm somewhat familiar with. How important is it for Strong DM to integrate with an Okta or ADs or other kind of directories and stuff like that?
It's critical. It's like one of the core principles of the business. I think, I'm guessing, Steve, that customer made the decision to buy Okta well before Strong DM.
I think it might have actually been around the same time, but yes, I think Okta was shortly before Strong DM.
Yeah, so you have to start with the question of what is my identity store? What controls identity? And then how do I integrate that identity store with everything else? So Strong has integrations with all of the SSOs because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. Steve's already invested a bunch of money in Okta. He's already invested a whole bunch of money in whatever he's using for automation, Terraform or otherwise, or an Amazon tool. Most companies have already invested a whole bunch of money in Splunk or Sumo Logic or QRadar, whatever they're using for logging. I don't need to reinvent the wheel with logging and alerting. I just need to make sure there's a connector between the two. And so that honoring what people have already invested a whole bunch of money in and sort of bet the farm on already is critical.
Yeah, Steve, you're an SRE, and so you live this every day. But it's something. I'm an observer now. My days of those battles are over, right? But as an observer, it's still, I shake my head sometimes because so many companies like Customer, right, have kind of made their bets on the tools that they use, right? They've put together an identity and access management, but it's not log management, cloud platforms, your whole tool set. But yet there are still plenty of companies who are trying to say, no, you should use us for everything, right? We could sort of do what Strong DM does, and the old saying with this, right? They try to give you 80% of the functionality for 40% of the price, and if that's good enough for you, it's good enough, right? And I was never a fan of that model. Liz, you're laughing. What do you think? I mean, we see this still, and I don't, I assume some companies go for that, but I can't imagine it really works out. You just don't get the function. We live in a great time where there's so much available to us to try to make lives easier for people like Steve, for the SREs of the world and the ops folks. Why would you try to just shove everything into one vendor and put up with less than? Steve, what do you think?
So it's definitely, when you're a smaller company, it's of course much easier to adopt and drop and try new technologies and vendors. But of course, as we've grown, that cost becomes higher and higher. So when I first joined Customer, we could try new things whenever we wanted. But I can already see in the couple years that I've been with the company that implementing something like Strong DM would be almost exponentially more effort now, because I'd have to go through different departments and accounting and finance and communicate with the team, and developers just want to know, how do I do my job? Like, just tell me what to do. And more than the functionality and the features of the product, I truly feel like we have a relationship with the Strong DM team. And that's almost just as important to us. We know that they are responsive, that they're going to listen to us, that they're going to help us out, and they have, like, literally weekly. And that is so important to us as customers, that if someone came along and said, hey, we'll charge you 50% of the price that StrongDM does, I don't think I would be too tempted to consider that right away.
Yeah, but I think that goes to the model today, right? It's part of this whole cloud native, open source, freemium core, open core, whatever you want to call it, which is the key is not to go hire some enterprise sales guy who comes by and wines and dines people. It's about, hey, here's the product. Let me get the product in your hands, right? Let me deliver delight, as they say, right, with that product. And the bonds that are formed from that type of relationship, right? It's, you want to call it DevRel, a lot of people call it developer relations and community relations. Those sort of bonds are much stronger than, what the old sort of sales game that I grew up in, for instance. Elizabeth, with what Steve is saying, is that sort of news to you, that it's much easier to get in and kind of grow with these customers than it is to try to come in, when they've reached a certain scale, and it's a lot harder to get adoptions done?
Certainly it's easier when a company is young, 50, 100, 150, even 200, to get implemented. I think to Steve's point, eventually you have a procurement department, and then you have to go through the traditional, like, oh, that's the price? Okay, we're going to knock it down by 50% now, right? And that's just how they operate. And certainly there are much longer sales cycles in the enterprise side with a company of customer size, even the size today, 2-week POC, and you can play with it enough to your point, Alan, where you decide if it's right for you, if it fits enough of your requirements. With larger enterprises, and again, to Steve's point, it's not, you do have to go team by team, right, at larger enterprise and say, okay, yep, so we're gonna do the finance team now, and then we're gonna do the engineering team, and then we're gonna do the DevOps team, and it's sort of rinse and repeat, and you get the hang of it after a while. But it's bite-sized chunks always, whether the bite-sized chunk is the entire company at once or work group by work group.
Yeah, so I think that very much mimics the whole DevOps adoption pattern as well, right? You don't go in and just turn on a large enterprise to DevOps. You do it bubble by bubble, team by team, right? And quite frankly, the other thing is, though, is I will tell you that sometimes that procurement process and all the BS that goes with it are why developers or DevOps people will whip out a credit card and just do it, right? And you get the whole shadow IT thing, whatever you want to call it. But it's like, who wants to, I got to sit and explain to this person why StrongDM makes my life easier. I mean, it's especially someone who has no technical background. It's where do I begin? But nevertheless, you guys got a year and a half of history here. Steve, where do you see, the first squads in Durham? I assume that means you guys are planning second and third squads, and maybe outside the U.S. and what have you. How is StrongDM tied in, I imagine, tied into that as the rollout moves along here?
Yeah, of course. It's become the way that we access our resources across all of engineering. And we actually acquired a Spanish company, Reply.ai,
very cool.
month back. Yeah, so thank you. So I've been having some conversations with the Reply engineers, and I can already tell that they're impressed with how we use StrongDM and how it kind of fits into our development workflow. And so that will be interesting because they have infrastructure of their own, infrastructure that we haven't used before. So it'll be a cool opportunity to say, how does this plug into StrongDM? And I really have no concerns that will be the case, but it's going to be a fun task to get all of that in the same kind of workflow that all of our customer engineers use today.
Excellent. When you say Spanish, like in Spain, excuse me, they're based in Spain.
based in Madrid. I believe they're a fully remote company though, throughout Spain. So they kind of have that remote culture already. So it's perfect for us right now. And of course, their AI expertise is nice to have as well.
Absolutely.
Where is their infrastructure? Like, is it in the US and AWS, or is it in something sitting in Europe?
I can't say too definitively, but I do know that they have a mix of AWS and Heroku right now.
Interesting.
Really?
So you've got
That's cool.
distributed team in Europe and now effectively multiple data centers, if you're talking AWS and Heroku, that aren't merged
Yes,
with customer as well. Yeah. See.
That's right.
Yep.
Sounds like an opportunity, Liz. Liz, let me ask you a question. How many? I mean, what I've always loved about the internet is it knows no borders, frankly, right? I remember the first time I put up websites and I started seeing hits come in from around the world. This is like 1996. And I was like, wow, we're global. Not at media, not this company, obviously, but what is the customer mix at Strong DM? Is it international or is it mostly US or?
It's heavily international. We've got actually a big contingent in Australia. We have Europe. We have Asia. Our large enterprise customers all have offices in India, whether they're using, contractors as a workforce or an actual office there. You got the US, you got Canada, South America. Mm-hmm. Oh, and you know what? Actually, I was just going to say we're not in Africa. We're totally in Africa. So it's everywhere. And then even we're not in the Middle East, I don't think. But even more interesting, I think, than where the people are, it's where the data centers are. You've got this crazy Cartesian product of people trying to connect to stuff. And most companies, we're in China. I mean, we've got people we have workers on factory floors in China who need to SSH into infrastructure. And so it's crazy to think about all of the networking going on, the latency and how to make that connect. And it's just personally fascinating to hear the new use cases that come up. I was like, when I heard factory, I was like, wow. And then I started thinking of like Tesla. It's like, I want to be on the factory floor of Tesla, but no.
Well, that could be in China too. It's funny you bring it up. I actually interviewed a CEO of a company maybe last week who they are instrumenting, manufacturing factories because a lot of that machinery was not connected that you had visibility. And they actually put things onto machinery that allow you to instrument them and monitor and stuff. There's amazing things going on. And by the way, each one of those add-ons to the manufacturing machines has to have a certificate, an identity. There's a whole piece of this to it, and I just think it continues to go on. Steve, we don't have a lot of time left. How has the COVID thing kind of affected you guys?
So personally, I feel incredibly fortunate to say that my work has changed almost not at all. I think my position in a lot of our department is very remote friendly. And even though we weren't set up really at all for remote before the pandemic, the transition has been relatively seamless. Obviously from a Strong DM perspective, it is seamless. But overall as a company, I think, of course, there's a ton of adjustments with different departments and some are having it easier than others. But I actually think engineering is our efficiency and output and how we've put out features since the beginning of this has actually increased just a little bit.
That's great to hear, man. Really good. Guys, we're about out of time. I want to thank both of you coming at us from New York today, I should mention. So thanks for joining us. Liz, any last thoughts, comments you want to add?
I don't think so. I wanted to say thanks to Steve, and I appreciate the comment on relationship. It's so important to us. I say, at Strong DM, everybody touches the customer equally. It doesn't matter if you're in account management or support or engineering. That I joke that if we were to ever have commissions at the company, which we don't, I would give support the commissions. because they're that
As
important.
as a support company, as an employee there, I can very much appreciate your support team as well, Liz. And it's not an exaggeration to say it's the best support that I've received from any vendor ever.
Very cool. Very cool. It's a good way to end it. All right. Elizabeth Zaman, CEO, Strong DM. Steve Flinchbar, SRE at Customer with a K. Thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV. This is Alan Schimmel. We'll be right back with our next guest. Okay, our next video is from the archives. It's from our TechStrong Con event, which was held a little over a month ago now. And this one features Tracy Walker of NewVector, who's going to talk about how to automate security in a Kubernetes system. It's really about security as code, which is something you may have heard. I don't know if you really thought about what it means or if you're doing it, but Tracy's going to explain it all to you. I think it was an excellent presentation. I think it's something here you'll learn and you'll be able to use. So let's now go to Tracy Walker from TechStrong Con, Tracy Walker from NewVector during TechStrong Con on how to automate security in a Kubernetes system.
Hi everyone, Tracy Walker from NewVector. Going to talk today about security as code. Let's jump right to it. So what is security as code? So we're probably very familiar with infrastructure as code. And infrastructure as code was one of the very first things from a DevOps perspective that we were shifting left, right? The developers were more knowledgeable about what kind of infrastructure things should be run on, so it's better for them to define it versus asking people in ops to guess what it should be. So they can actually put that in their code. That can be part of the software development lifecycle. It can be under version control. And it basically defines what that infrastructure should look like. It's really made cloud-enabled apps or even cloud-native applications possible in the new world. Security as code is very much the same thing, but it's a little bit different. When you think about who traditionally has been the source of information around security, it's usually been the network folks or maybe your NOC or in operations, setting policies on firewalls, load balancers, different gateway devices, right? So security as code hasn't had the luxury of it being easily defined in development, mainly for a lack of tools, right? There's security as code as far as like setting policies and things like that in Kubernetes, Docker, but those are things that actually don't change very often. So not a huge challenge to define those earlier in the life cycle, but they don't change very often. Things that change a lot, especially in an ephemeral environment such as Kubernetes, those typically be the kind of things that are the challenge there. So security as code has been very aspirational. If you do a YouTube search or you look through a lot of, look at different white papers and state of DevOps and things like that, security is talked about an awful lot. But security as code, things that developers can actually get their arms around, define early in the software development lifecycle, version control that, and make that part of their SDLC, largely aspirational, at least in my opinion. So, security as code. So in Kubernetes, and we're going to jump right really kind of the heart of how you can do security as code and use a tool like NewVector to accomplish that. In Kubernetes, as you've probably been reading for the last 60 seconds, everything is declarative. It's a configuration object that represents the desired state, right? So everything in Kubernetes is about keeping this desired state. One of those states can definitely be security. And you can deliver that as part of your SDLC. Certainly there are challenges to that. For example, what security settings should be set? If you set those security settings, do you risk breaking things later? Sometimes in an environment you have developers and maybe you've invited the security team or someone from the NOC, network operations, maybe they've been invited to the 2 pizza team party. But how often are you really able to collaborate on what security policies should look like? It's usually discussions around what kind of authentication are we going to use? You know, how are we scanning for vulnerabilities? Things like this. But when it gets down to really specific etched in, you know, laser cut, etched in stone security policies that really protect an application to its known behavior, again, largely aspirational. So I shouldn't have to cover too much about why security is code. The number one reason is same answer is why are you doing Kubernetes, right? This is all about speeding up software development, everything about getting value to your end customer, internally, externally, being able to take an idea from fruition to delivery, right? So that's why you're doing Kubernetes in the first place, or OpenShift, or Rancher, or containers. You're trying to deliver lots of things much, much faster. You're trying to manage microservices so that you don't have to change monolith applications and do large releases. These are all the reasons. This is exactly the same reason why you would want to do security as code. Again, some of the challenges there are if things are changing rapidly, which typically security does not like. They don't really like having to change firewall policies or very tight-grained security policies a lot, because they want things to be very stable. They want to be able to see differences or things that get blocked, or, you know, any changes to that ecosystem. So this is why you should be doing security as code. And again, some of those challenges that come there. Everything that I'm about to show you, literally NuVector gets deployed in minutes. Our world record time from a customer with a completely an open environment, a new environment, development environment, whatever it is, you can deploy NuVector in minutes and have it set up and running and learning about your network patterns and the application behavior literally in minutes. So this is not a heavy-handed application. And I'm not going to cover a lot of details about the application. This is really more focused on how you can actually do security as code. So very quickly, it's important to understand how is it that we're able to do this. So we're taking advantage of Kubernetes custom resource definitions, or CRDs. So this is made available to basically customize, enhance Kubernetes with third-party applications, whatever the case may be. In those CRDs, we have custom resource that is an extension. Let me get down. We have two different types. So these two extensions, we're going to have the NV security rule. So the scope of this is at a namespace level. So we can establish a CRD that will allow for a security rule at a namespace level, as well as at a cluster level. What I'm going to demonstrate today will be at the namespace level, but you can easily apply the exact same approach at a cluster level as well. So if you have multiple clusters in different environments, you might be able to do security as code from development into QA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk a little bit about exactly how this works. So we're going to create a YAML file, and that YAML file is going to contain some very detailed security policies. These security policies are going to include network connections, port protocol, layer 7 protocol, as well as processes and file access. So if you think about it, we're thinking about network, we're thinking about the processes that are running within your cluster, and any file access that's happening. So these are really kind of the three components: network, compute, storage, that any environment is going to have. And the network is actually the best place to do this with, because everything travels with the network. You can't be hacked if they're not using the network. You know, that's why we have security around data centers, so that you can't access those physically. So the network really is the transit path to be watching to identify a lot of these security policies and enforce those policies. So you can see here from the graphic, we're going to create this YAML file. I've already going to have a CRD created. That CRD looks a little bit like this. So that's the complete CRD definition for these security rules. You can see here that the scope is namespaced. So there's another one that looks very similar to this for the cluster level scope. And that's exactly how we're going to apply this. So this part is not going to be part of the security as code piece. This is just setting it up so that Kubernetes knows how to apply and enforce these using NuVector to enforce these rules. And so once we do this kube apply, we're going to apply that YAML file to this environment, and then we'll be able to see the differences between what was applied security as code even versus what was learned in the environment itself. So if you haven't fallen asleep yet, or you haven't started surfing Twitter, I covered just really quickly a little bit about what's actually in that security as code policy. So again, we're talking about everything from, there we go, NV security rules. So this is the type, all of the egress, ingress, all of the ports that can be allowed, the protocols that those ports can use. So this is pretty high, high level of definition for the security policy we're talking about. Also, there's the file access, the processes that we're going to allow. You can see that we've got an action here that says allow this process to run, as well as the policy mode monitor. So within NuVector, the tool, we have different levels that you can enforce policies. We have a discover mode that learns everything so that all of this information can be automatically generated. We then have a monitor mode, which is really kind of a baseline. You've established your baseline with your discover mode, and now we're going to monitor any differences to that baseline. And then we have a protect mode, which actually enforces those policies. So we'll play a little bit with that as well. So now let's go into what this actually looks like. So I've got an environment right here. I'm going to log into my NuVector application, and we've got a dashboard. So I'm going to go to my policies under my groups. So these are groups that are automatically created in NuVector. We're learning basically all about all of the different groups and how they're talking. You see my policy mode is in monitor, and I've got this type over here that says learned, covered by network rules. So we're showing a lot of the network rules here. This is basically coming from this picture right here. When NuVector goes to work, it's immediately learning about everything that's in your environment. We're actually watching the network itself. We're doing this by looking at the network, looking at the port protocol, everything that's happening. And so all these lines that you see here, these are being automatically discovered and created by NuVector. And then they get built into these policies that you see right here. So when you see learned, that means we've learned this stuff automatically. I can also have a user created, so you can apply rules yourself. You see those there. We also have some federated because we do multi-cluster rules across different cluster. What I want to get to here is I've got this environment. I'm going to filter for just a very few down here, these 3 pods down here. So I've got these 3. And over here, you can see I've got this export group policy. So these rules that have been learned, as well as this mode that's in monitor, I'm going to export that. And it's going to be a YAML file. And let's just call this tracy.yaml. And let's put that in our downloads environment. We'll replace whatever it was I had there when I was practicing. And let's take a look at this file real quick. So in this, you can start to see we've got the namespace level. We're lots of key criteria, application, HTTP, WordPress, ingress, etc. So everything we were talking about. In fact, in here, if I can find it, we've got this one area where we've got a connection to Google that's being allowed. And I'll take a look at this real quick right in here. I have something else selected, forgive me. That was not supposed to be selected. Go back here to find this group. So you can see we've got some file access rules. We're not going to allow that. We've got some predefined filters for that. We've got process rules. So these are all the processes that have been identified. These are all going to be allowed. and then my network rules. And you'll notice this one here, we've got one that even goes to Google. That was user created, so we're allowing that, and these other things. So I've exported those rules for those 3 groups. And now I want to apply them to a different environment. Similar, but different, kind of like dev, QA, pre-prod, etc. So this environment is not running in Google. It's actually running on AWS. Brand new, fresh environment. Doesn't have much in it, but it does have similar assets to what we were talking about as far as those groups go. You'll notice that this has a little bit different coloring. So if I jump to my network activity, not a lot going on. Really fresh environment. We're in learning mode, so NeuVector is learning all of the connections that may be happening. I'm not too worried about that, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply that policy that we just exported, that I've probably also put into Git. It's under version control. I'm going to show I've got those same 3 groups right down here. And if I go to my processor, let's go to the network rules. Not a lot going on. We've learned a couple of rules here, learned that within the last couple of days. So not very much going on here. I'm going to jump to my command line, get to my downloads directory, and there's my tracy.yaml file right there. All right, so we're going to use a kubectl command to apply this YAML file to that to this environment that we have back here on AWS. So let's do kubectl. I've got that. Create. And now we've applied, and you can even see here NV security rule. I've created essentially security policies for those 3, that Nginx, Node, Redis. And so if I come back over here and I refresh, you notice we have some new colors. So now not only do we have user created learn, we also have CRD, which is the custom resource definition that we just applied. You'll notice that we've applied that for those 3. Also this cube system, because that policy is part of one of these. You can see that 11005, so that connection is with this. So what we've done here is we've now taken that CRD, we have applied it to a different environment, and not only have we changed the security that is being enforced at this point, we've also changed that now we're not in discover mode, we're in monitor mode. So if I look back again at this particular, we can now see for that the pod that we were looking at previously for those network rules, you'll see we've got 4 CRDs as well as these learned rules. So what we're able to see here is even some security drift. If you were in discover mode, or if you were learning within a QA environment, and then you applied the CRD from development, you're going to see, is there any differences? There should be some similarities. We've got Redis and HTTP. Redis and HTTP is also there, and this Google rule has been there. You know what, for this environment though, let's assume I've had a discussion with my security guys. We've reviewed all these rules. We've actually gone into NeuVector and kind of challenged all the processes and network things, and had discussion, and we've decided that we're not going to allow outbound traffic to Google from one of these pods. So how would I change that? So let's go back to this. We're going to VI that tracy.yaml file. I'm going to search for that Google. Here it is. I think this is the only place that it's, and it is. This is the only place that it exists in this YAML file. You see this action here is for allow. So let's make that a deny. And now I'm going to apply that file. We get some warnings. We come back. Let's do another refresh. I'll scroll down to, and we'll look at that network rule, and now you can see that this action is deny. So now I'm able to manage my security rules outside of the tool. I can version control that. I can make changes to it. I can see the different changes that are coming down the pipe, and I can use that as security as code. I can basically laser cut security policies around the behavior of my application as learned by NeuVector, and then apply those as a CRD within your Kubernetes cluster, and then enforce those with NuVector as well. This is done at layer 7, and again, we're doing this using network inspection. The discover mode, quick point, a lot of times people will ask, well, what's the performance hit on that? So the performance on discover mode and monitor mode, the performance hit that you take on that is 0. We're basically a tap on your network. We're seeing the traffic flow by. There's no latency involved. We're just recording what's happening, showing you the differences between your baseline and what we're actually seeing in the network traffic itself. In the protect mode, we have tried to, we've done performance testing to try to see how bad can we make the performance. We've never been able to incur more than 10% latency when we tried to. On average, it's about a 2 to 3% performance hit to your throughput, because we're actually actively in line for your network traffic at that point. So a fantastic way to do security as code, enforce that security as code, and really a great way to build bridges between development, DevOps, and your network, your NOC, your security folks, to have something that you can actually collaborate on, define as security as code, and manage that, shift that management a little bit left to your developers, where they can also kind of manage this and understand what it is their application is actually doing, what it should be doing in a production environment, and then block things that are anomalous to that behavior. So with that, let me see. Usually we have questions by this point. And if you're wondering, well, so a couple of other quick points. When you are enforcing your security as code in NuVector in this way, you really can't change it. Change it through the tool. The security around this is now being enforced from the CRD. So your changes would then have to become part of going through that YAML file, making changes to that, just like you would any other kind of configuration or YAML file. The fact that it's built for you from the beginning automatically gives you some confidence that it already works. You can just make small changes, not introduce syntax errors and things like that. Makes it very easy actually to apply those changes, see what those changes are going to be, and kind of manage it that way. So with that, in summary, I don't really have a summary slide, but in summary, you can do security as code at a very, you can do security as code. You can do it at a detailed level. You don't have to incur a bunch of performance overhead that's going to make any difference in latency or throughput. And you can do that with NuVector. So that's basically our spiel on security as code. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm at Tracy Skywalker on Twitter. Obviously, you can reach us at NuVector via Twitter at NuVector, or send an email to twalker@nuvector.com. We're happy to support your security needs as you're moving to microservices and Kubernetes infrastructure. Thank you so much for watching.
Hope you enjoyed that presentation from TechStrong Con. I thought it was a good one. I thought it was a real good one. Security as code is something to think about. I want to go over a couple of headlines with you today. Let's first start with Container Journal. And that is Red Hat expands container cost optimization tool. And that's a good tool for you guys to use if, as you expand your container infrastructure. Sometimes it's hard to get a handle on what the real costs there are. Also a good article on Thycotic, a good company in the space to pay attention to. Thycotic extends secrets management reach to Kubernetes. And the whole area of secrets management is something that we're really seeing a lot of news around lately. So I expect, usually where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think that market's really heating up. I think we're going to continue to see more there on secrets management. On Security Boulevard, we have continuous intelligence driver for cyber success. And then Microsoft sued for LinkedIn clipboard snooping scare. not the kind of PR Microsoft's looking for on LinkedIn. I got to be honest with you. I think since they've taken it over, I enjoy LinkedIn more. I get less spam. I think it's more useful, but this is not the direction we were looking for there. Also on the boulevard, we have why your cloud apps deserve better data protection. If they ever did, they do now. And now over to DevOps.com, where we have designing engineering teams for scale. It's a good article there on a little bit of a how-to. An article about Sentry. They just added application performance monitoring to their platform. Google has tapped AMD for confidential computing service. You know, it's a brave new world out there, right? And Google shunned or didn't pick Intel here. They're going with AMD. See what comes out of that. And then on the Time Series Virtual Speaker Summit Spotlight, and I mentioned that summit is out there today. Go check it out. We have John Herlocker and Miroslav Maleka, and this is the fourth in this series of Time Series Virtual Speaker Summits Spotlight. So please check that out. There's another series of articles I wanted to mention to you. It started last week. Mike Vizard put up an article about a new consortium that Google spun up that was meant to control trademarks and other marks for open source projects, but not the code, not the project itself, more like the trademarks and IP, if you will. Which, by the way, is not a new concept in open source. This has always been something that a lot of people didn't really understand, that you can put the code open, anyone could use it, they could change it, but if you make changes to code, you're supposed to contribute it back to the project, but that doesn't, using that code or being able to use that code doesn't give you the right to the name or the trademarks of that project. That's retained by the project owner. And anyway, Google did this, and by itself it doesn't sound bad, but they also contributed 3 of their projects into this, probably the biggest one being Istio. And this set off a bit of a brouhaha in the open source world. IBM felt blindsided by it because they're a major contributor along with Google to the Istio code. And most people had thought, based upon something Google had said or written in 2017, that Istio was going to be given over to the CNCF. And the folks at CNCF, I think, and perhaps rightfully so, were taken back by this seeming change of course by Google. And so Mike's article, that was last week, set off a nice Twitter. There was a nice Twitter sphere kind of thread going on around the issues of it. Mike then followed it up with an article on Container Journal earlier this week, because the other shoe dropped here, and that is that Google announced changes to the way the Istio governing board would be constituted. And obviously they're not giving it to CNCF, and they're instituting a model where the board that governs the code and the direction of Istio would be constituted based upon how much code a company contributed to the product. And with IBM and Google as major contributors, of course, they would have the majority of the board seats. But there would be seats set aside for the community at large, and and those would be chosen by the community. But to be eligible, you had to have some contribution to the project. It's unclear whether that contribution was actual code or other contribution, but you had to make a contribution to the project. And of course, now this really got things churning within the open source community. And what it's done is it's opened a sort of self-reflection in the community on what are we doing right or wrong. Now, I, for one, always believed that we as a group, this is a golden age for open source. The foundational era of open source has led to open source adoption like we've never seen before. Now, is it that open source is being managed by foundations where it's not one company managing them, so other companies don't feel inhibited? I don't know, but what we're going, what came out in the Twitter is some folks feel seeing the CNCF and by linkage, the Linux Foundation are too powerful. They make a lot of money. They become marketing machines instead of open source community managers, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm just saying what I've read out in Twitter. And maybe it's time, and Google saw this, and maybe it's time to do something else. Another school of thought is that a recent executive at Google came over from Oracle and is questioning the wisdom of contributing valuable open source tools or projects to multi-company foundations like this, right? How valuable would Kubernetes be, or has Google gotten the value out of being the progenitors of Kubernetes? One could say if they didn't give it to the open source community, would Kubernetes be as popular? We would be using Docker Hub right now or something else, or Docker Swarm. But in any event, I think the big loser here is the open source community. And I wrote an article on this yesterday on DevOps.com. My hope is that whatever's going to happen here